Well, it's another session of the Style Sessions, another week. I'm Roger Mittag. Welcome. I'm your host. I'm the founder of Prud'homme Beer Certification and president of Thirst for Knowledge, a beer education company that was founded in 2005. And we've had a lot of fun doing these style sessions. This is where we explore a variety of different traditional beer styles. And we have some fun along the way. We answer some questions. Hello, Harold. Got Monday Night Piper. Interesting. The Brock Street one. Back at the cellar of McEwen's. Oh my God, that's going to be so good. I'm excited for the McEwen's. It's going to be good. It's high alcohol. It'll be pretty decent. Yeah. So anyway, it's that time of the year where not a ton is going on in the beer industry. And sometimes we just have to wait and see what's going on. Hello, Vess. Scotch Ale's in my lineup plus Highlander. I was really looking for Highlander. I couldn't find it. Innocent Gun Original. I've got that one in the cellar. Ola Dew. Excellent, excellent beer. Not quite a Scotch Ale, but excellent beer. Hello, Daniel, James, and Chantel, and Burger. I know because Burger's watching most likely. Hello, Marisa. Got the Mclean's Armchair. We're gonna have some fun tonight because hi Annie. Um, yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of fun. I went out and looked for Scotch ales, and I found the four that were available in the LCBO. I don't think that's everything that's available. I think some places, as Vess said, he's got Highlander. I was seriously looking for that, and I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't find it. Of course, I didn't go venturing everywhere. But Highlander, I would expect, is probably going to be one of the best ones. Ola Dew doesn't quite fit into this style, but we'll talk a little bit about the style as a whole. But some cool and interesting things. Hey, Craig, how are you? Um, yeah, we're getting ready to get back in the classroom, which should be a lot of fun. Daniel Podlovich and Lena, hello. This is nice. We're getting some new people. This is fun. Um, yeah, we're getting ready to go back in the classroom if and when we possibly can, which is going to be really cool. But I've been pretty excited. I've been doing a whole bunch of level one programs for clients in groups. And they're actually turning out really nice. I'm really enjoying doing them. We're doing primarily tasting sessions, but next week with a couple of different customers, a group out west in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, we're actually doing full class online. So I'm going to be lecturing online in this format for about 3 hours a day for the next 4 weeks. Hi, Kathy, and Dave is coming soon. That's nice. I think Dave is my newfound friend at the Avenue Road LCBO, and I'm sure Dave has lots of Scotch ales there. Um, so all kinds of cool things happening. Monday Night Piper as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, I had it today, and I'll be able to open up a little bit of a discussion on the four beers that I featured and why some fit in the category and why others don't. So it's just after 8. Might as well get this whole thing on the go. This is an interesting style because I don't know how it really defines itself. Um, there's a part of me that's thinking this is a Scottish version of a Bock beer, and everything that you read should tell you almost identical to that. So why don't you guys open a beer of your choice? I'm actually going to have the Brock Street Scotch Ale, and Anne's going to have that with me. Um, Pick something that you want to explore. Maurice's got Mclean's Armchair, which is kind of interesting as well. And we'll be able to talk a little bit about some of the different beers that you guys have and the things that I found. I mean, one of the really interesting things that I found, and anybody who's been in my class before understands this full well, that You know, it's one thing to taste a beer all on its own because you can really enjoy that particular beer. You can think this is a fantastic beer. I've really enjoyed it. But when you start putting them side by side and start measuring them based on a barometer, then everything changes. Hello, Scotty. Scotty Boyle is also known as the Bald Beer Guy, and he's one of my instructors, and I'm always happy to have him on board. He's out in Hamilton doing some great stuff with beer out there. Annie, your beer is ready for you anytime you want, so come on down and get it. So let me tell you a little bit of history while we have this. So Mclean's Armchair and Russell Angry Scotch. Oh, Russell is a great BC brewer. Be interesting to taste that one. Let's go into a little bit of history so that we can understand where the term Scotch ales actually came from, because clearly they're not made with Scotch. So Scotch ales were nicknamed that because they were originally higher alcohol beers that were being exported out of Edinburgh. There you go, Ann.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, in the 1800s, and so they just referred to them as Scotch ales. There is a difference between a Scottish ale and a Scotch ale. Scottish ales, normally speaking, are a little bit lower in alcohol, and I think that's what you're going to find. The Monday Night Piper from Second Wedge. Second Wedge is a craft brewery located in Uxbridge, and they've created one called Monday Night Piper. I found it really interesting that most of these beers had some kind of orange tinge to it. And I didn't really understand that because I don't think orange is very much a part of Scottish culture. Whereas Brock Street has a tartan on it, and a little bit of red, which is definitely very Scottish. Um, so, um, Back in those days, beers were referred to quite often by shilling, and you would have 40 shilling or 60 shilling, 70 shilling, 80 shilling, and 90 shilling. And the term shilling was really referred to the amount of tax imposed on a keg. So back in those days, it could have been a firkin, or it could have been a hogshead, which is the size of a hectoliter. So it's about the size of two of our kegs right now. And so traditional Scottish beers would be referred to as 80 shilling. And I don't know if any of you were around when there used to be a beer that came in probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was called Caledonia 80 Shilling. And Caledonia is a very, very staunch Scottish brewer, and they were producing beers that they felt were reflective of that particular style. So 80 shillings would be virtually what you could imagine a British pale ale, but only from Scotland. So darker caramel colors, really nice aromatics. So those were 80 shillings. And then the higher alcohol beers, which were great for export because when you increase alcohol, you increase the ability to preserve the beer, were called 90 shillings. And 90 shillings are what we know as Scotch ale. So the characteristics to me, when you do enough research on it, is that these things should be really, really malt forward. So the expectation from my side is that you get caramel, toffee, some whole grain breads, honey, dates, raisins, perhaps some figs, fruitcake, those kind of characteristics. Maybe a touch of anise or black licorice in there as well, but some pretty complex flavors and aromas. A bit of booziness to it, or a bit of warmth, because typically these are in the 6 to 7 or 8 range. And a little bit of softer mouthfeel because typically British beers do not carbonate as highly as North American beers do. So a little bit softer. Finish is not quick. It's more medium to moderate, not long in any way, shape, or form. And not a ton of aftertaste, but probably more on the dark fruit side again, or the caramel side. Who else have I got? Rebecca and Bry and Callum. Callum's my grandson, our grandson who's been on Earth for 4 weeks, and he's in there probably just laying low. Hey, Jared. Nice to see you again as well, or see your name because I don't get to see you guys. So anyway, this is what my expectations are on on a Scotch ale. So really, a Scottish form of a bock would be a really good way of describing this. Um, but when I bought these four beers, and some of them say Scotch ale on them, and some of them do not. So Midnight Piper does not, or Monday Night Piper, sorry, it does not say Scotch ale. It says Scottish ale. So for me, um, my my flags went up on that one immediately because I thought, oh, it's at 4.8% ABV, which really sort of took it out of Scotch ale characteristics. Um, and it's a decent beer. Like it really is. It's got some really interesting aromatics, a little bit more on the toffee. I found a little bit of woody characteristics to it, some darker breads, um, more burnt raisin. I found it had quite an intense characteristic to it, both on the aromatics and the flavors, but also on the finish. I found the finish to be a slight lingering, and I thought the CO2 was a bit high for this particular style. Um, Not a ton in the body. So most of the complexity came in the nose on Monday Night Piper. In the body, I got a little bit of burnt sugar in there, some cocoa, and some whole grain toast, and that was about it. So not an overly complex beer, not really what I was expecting, but all on its own, excellent beer. Really easy to drink, goes with a lot of food. Thought it was kind of cool. Um, the Mclean's Armchair. I know some of you have that. I thought it was decent. 7.5% alcohol, so it was right in the range where it should have been. Really nice color. I absolutely love the color on this one. It was really an orange and copper and rusty kind of tone to it. It was fairly clear. Really nice butterscotch colored foam on it. And then the nose for me, even though it had some toffee and some raisins, whole wheat toast, it was a bit earthy and quite a bit of whetstone and minerality to me. And that carried through into the body and the flavor of the beer. So I got quite a bit of that. I found it quite tannic. So it had some lingering bitterness that almost reminded me of tea. It was quite dry, so it wasn't really any of the sweetness that you would associate with a higher alcohol beer. Medium finish, CO2 was bang on style on that particular one, so I really enjoyed that. I'm going to move over to Sons of Kent because I know some of you may have bought that. I know Daniel and Lena certainly did. This was my least favorite out of the four of these, mainly because I didn't think it was anywhere close to style. Color-wise, not close to style. Alcohol was way too high. It was at 9% ABV. The color was really, really like an orange, but almost a bright orange, almost a cantaloupe kind of color to it. I found when I poured it, the foam just collapsed almost immediately. And I mean, that's a really good indicator of high alcohol. So when a foam just drops like it's nobody's business, that's going to be lots of high alcohol content in there. It was a bit disappointing to see that. But the nose on this beer was apple. I'm sorry, I've got my tasting notes in front of me, so I'm going to read them because I can't remember everything. But apple, banana, bubblegum, nutmeg, cloves, some oak notes in there, orange zest. And on the back end, when it started to open up and breathe a little bit, I got some good, decent solvent like nail polish. And those are very, very reflective of high alcohol beers that we've seen in the marketplace before. And what it reminded me of was Old English or Crest or Fax 10, these high octane beers that are meant not for sitting and enjoying, but for other things. Hey, Paul, what do you mean butter late? You're having butter. Sorry. Paul's a good friend. The flavor profile on the Sons of Kent, and Sons of Kent is down in Chatham. Cloves, honey, banana, like banana flambe. So like an alcohol soaked banana that's just been torched. It really didn't do very much for me. I found it to be really boozing, and it just didn't strike me as anywhere reflective of a Scotch ale. The interesting thing is that it won a gold award in the Ontario Brewing Awards last year in 2020. And for the life of me, I can't understand how it may have won. I'm maybe sounding a little bit negative right now, but man, when you put something on a label that you're saying it is, it better be really close to it. Well, that brings me to Brock Street. And Brock Street is in Whitby. They've been around, I think, since 2005, they said. I'm just looking at the can. I know that they put it on here. 2015, sorry. Um, and I was kind of interested in what this one had to offer. And this was the one that I tasted second. Or actually, I tasted this one first. Now, this one is the one that I think, out of the group of the four that I did, was most reflective of this style. It really, I thought it had a lot of really cool things going on it. I love the colors of it. I thought the color was really bright red, like almost like a black plum flesh. Like if you opened up a black plum and looked in there, it was that kind of red. Foam was interesting. It was more butter, coffee cream kind of color to it. But man, the aromas were so complex. I had things like caramel, raisins, dates, brown sugar, dark artisanal honey, brown bread, like that really nice brown bread that you can get from a baker. Black licorice molasses came in on the back end, and then some fruitcake. That was all on the nose. And then in the body of the beer, more of the fruits, more dates, more raisins, honey. I got a little note of coffee in this particular one. Not a lot, but more of a milder coffee. Dark chocolate. And then there was some initial sweetness on the tip of my tongue that once I swallowed actually just blended right into this gentle bitterness that I thought was quite pleasant and very refreshing. I did have a little bit of coffee on the aftertaste and a little bit of lingering bitterness, but that's what I was expecting. And so, if I had to give awards out, Brock Street for me would win the gold in this competition. But I enjoyed it. It's an interesting style to do. We don't see very many people doing these styles, and I think they're quite complex if they're treated properly. But nonetheless, oh yeah, tons of fruit on this. So. Before I go, I'm going to leave it to you guys to ask some questions, but or comments. Before I go there, next week will probably be our last one for a little while because I've got a few other things happening on Monday nights. But next week, I was really digging deep to try to figure out what kind of style we can do that we haven't already done that might actually be easy to get. And so I've settled on fruit beers next week. I don't know exactly which fruit beers I'm going to have, but things like Kawartha Lakes Raspberry Wheat and Fruly, and we'll see if there's some lambic beers in the marketplace. But we'll definitely take a look at some fruit beers. We could look at Kronenberg 1664 Fruit Rouge, which is excellent. I really like that beer, which reminds me I might just have to go and get that one. Scotty, you grabbed an Old Chub Scotch Ale. Oscar Blues. Oscar Blues is a Florida brewery, and they've been around for quite a long time, but they're quite large. They're a significant player, and that's interesting. And Scotty's enjoying it at 8% ABV. Any questions from anybody? I was going to do a wee bit of Scotch talking. Scotty is Scottish. Go figure. But we can do a little bit of Scotch accent or Scottish accent so that we understand where these beers actually came from. That's enough for that. How would I characterize Ola Do and Track Air House Ale? Harold's got an Amsterdam Framboise. Oh my God, that's old. Ola Do means old oil, and it's from a brewery called Harveston in Scotland. It is a really, really complex beer. I would almost, and Traquair House Ale, same same type of beers. I think we almost have to look at them as fortified porters, like almost Baltic porters, Vess. And I think that you would get what I'm talking about with those. Those are really, really intense, very complex beers that don't fit into these traditional styles. Um, and for me, they're probably more Baltic porter than anything else. Harold's talking about Amsterdam Framboise. Used to be one of my favorite raspberry beers in the world. They've always done an amazing job of it. And of course, you have lambics. I would assume that. I had a really really nice lambic framboise a few weeks ago that I got in a gift pack from the LCBO at Christmas time, and had some vanilla ice cream with it. It was just phenomenal. Just reminded me of how much I love lambic beers. So yeah, time for a sip, I think. I think the more that I'm drinking this Brock Street um, Scottish Ale, the more I'm enjoying it. And it's a lot different. I've said this to you before. It's a lot different evaluating beer than it is actually sitting down and drinking it. Um, Sometimes when we drink the beers, we don't necessarily have to take the time to sit and process the information behind it. Sometimes it's just pure enjoyment. It's just about drinking it, savoring it, and having a good conversation with somebody that is near you, close to you, virtual. Um, there's all kinds of ways that we can enjoy beers these days. Years ago you had a Gordon Scotch brewed in Belgium since World War One. Wow, they started brewing it Scottish soldiers. That's cool. What a great story that is. Somebody else was talking about a beer that they had. Oh, I think as soon as Harold signed in, he said he had a McEwen's. McEwen's is one of the original Scottish breweries that was in Canada for a long period of time. And good thing about these beers is because of the high alcohol, they'll probably age decently. Certainly not going to have the same CO2 content that you would get normally, but they should be good things to sit in the cellar and age. I did like the Mclean's Armchair. I thought that one was pretty decent. Um, but yeah, so not a lot out there. Highlander is a really interesting brewery. I think who said that they had one of those? McEwen's Dark Caramel. Yeah, the hazy is probably going to be proteins that are in there, Harold. Not a lot of CO2. It would have escaped. Yeah, cool. That's exactly what I would expect. Somebody said, I think it was Vesta said he had a Highlander. Um, Highlander is located up in South River, which is on the edge of Algonquin Park, and it's probably about 30, 40 minutes north of Huntsville. Cool little brewery, great little town, all kinds of really cool stuff that's going on up there. And these guys are always making half decent beers. And I think I might have mentioned this in a previous one, but the guy who started the brewery's name was Brian Wilson and not Beach Boys Brian Wilson. Um, yeah, I can see Harold a bit sugary going on, but that's really high alcohol that's doing that, and it's going to stay in there. It's not going to go anywhere. And the thing with aging beers is I think you tend to lose the bitterness, so you get a little bit more. And great question. When would you drink a Scotch ale? Cold night, windy night, fire around a fire with some friends or a campfire outside when we get to do that again. Um, to me, it's more of an after dinner drink. And, I think one of the things that a lot of people would look at in Germany is Bock beers are typically dessert beers in Germany. And I would look at the same thing with a Scotch ale. To me, a Scotch ale is something that you have afterward when you're sitting around and you're having a conversation, you're debating things that are going on around the world. And you just want to sit and soothe and sip on it and not be in a hurry. Because these are not, I mean, anything with high alcohol should be sipped and savored. It shouldn't be really consumed very quickly, which is why that other beer that I reviewed earlier just doesn't have any value because it's high octane and people are just going to drink it to get stupid. Um, but I think a Scotch Ale, it opens up and it breathes really nicely. Could generally have it with some desserts as well. Like think of a sticky toffee pudding with this, and I know that that to me would just be like heaven in a glass and heaven on a plate, just sort of moving together. Um, but nice fire up in the Blue Mountains, maybe. Um, Sitting there having a nice fire, just watching the snow come down. That would be a really enjoyable time to have a good Scotch ale, especially with people that you love. So, um, or if you get a chance to just hang out with some people and just have some fun and just talk and share old stories and look at old pictures and that kind of stuff, or listen to cool music. I'm always um, I'm always interested. Craig's on the talk, but Craig's got a really cool Instagram um, page where he talks about albums all the time, and he's always playing different vinyls. So it's always interesting to see what Craig has to say. Uh, yeah, I mean, Marisa makes a really good point. Yeah, that's great, Kathy. I agree with you. Perfect. Marisa makes a really good point. Is sometimes with high alcohol beers, you don't taste the booziness, and that's a sign of a really well constructed, well balanced beer. And this is the one thing that I think a lot of European brewers take a much greater effort and more pride is you make a beer that's got high alcohol, but you've also got all these other complex characteristics that are going on, and so the alcohol tends to dissipate a little bit more, and you don't feel it, and you don't taste it. So for me, um, it's really it's about taking the time to make this beer proper and make sure that the alcohol is a characteristic of the beer, but it's not the dominating characteristic. Scotty's always asking what cheeses. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Definitely old cheddars. Um, Hands down, that would be a great cheese to have with this. Um, I might think of something with a touch of sweetness in there as well. There's some really cool goat cheeses with fruits in them, and I saw one in the store a long time ago, and it had apricots, and it was a goat cheese with apricot. That would be really cool to have with this. Think about a cheese that might have a little bit more sweetness than saltiness, although salt would be good because then you get that salted caramel kind of characteristic. That's why the old cheddar. Um, just trying to think what else. Smoked Gouda. Hmm, maybe. Depends on how heavy the smoke is. There's a lot of people. One of the interesting things that we haven't really talked about is a lot of brewers tend to have a smoky characteristic in their Scotch ales, and that's not really one of the essences of this beer. It's more of a modern thought process on to put peating in there or smokiness. But Scottish beers typically don't have peat in them. And I was reading something when I was doing all the research on this that a lot of people really, Scottish people don't believe that peat is a part of Scotch whiskey. It wasn't historically a part of it. It's only been more of a modern spin on it. Irish ale is very different than Scotch ales. Um, yeah, I wouldn't. Irish ales are more to the line that they are reddish British pale ales. So they're going to be a little bit more on the reddish side and have a little bit more smoky characteristics. But typically, the alcohol content is somewhere around 4 to 5%, whereas a Scotch ale is going to be in that 6.5 and greater. Typically, not really above 8%, whereas Scottish ales are going to be more like Irish ales. I really love the fruity notes on this. So this is quickly becoming one of my favorite Scotch ales. All right, so um, I'll just leave it for a second or two and see if you guys have any more questions at all. And other than that, we are going to be doing some fruit beers next week. So there's lots of really cool ones out there. If you want to try, typically when I think about fruit beers, I think of red fruit. But that's not all there is out there. There are quite a few really interesting blueberry beers out there. Broadhead, who's located in Ottawa, does a really, really nice blonde blueberry ale. Lots of blueberries on the nose. Just finishes and tastes like a great beer. Like it's a really thirst quenching, easy beer to drink, but smells really nice. Like smells like blueberries. So I will post something in the next day or two about all the different types of fruit beers that you can probably find available to you, and look for some suggestions over the next 3, 4, 5 days on different beers that we can try next week. You certainly can try Fruity. It might be a touch sweet, and I haven't had it in a long time, but lots of really great fruit beers out there. And as always, my name is Roger Mittag. We have Prud'homme beer certification both online and classroom coming back, and some really cool remote sessions where we're doing online plus some virtual tastings as well. Um, Recently found out that there's a website in the United States that has rated us as the best online beer certification program or beer education program, uh, period. And so I'm really reveling in that. That's a great thing for us as a whole and for this program. So Scotty, nice as always to have you along. And so with that, I will highlighted the COVID work week. Yeah, which is always interesting, right? With that, I will bid you all adieu. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure that you like our YouTube channel, tell other people about it. We've had quite a few new subscribers, and it's great. I just love sharing information. So keep well, have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday. All right, see ya.